Hi folks, this is just a quick guide to improving your home internet with a few quick solutions and perhaps slightly more complex solutions, but mostly things that you can do at home while we're kind of locked down from access to the stores and ISPs actually fixing things. Hopefully it's helpful.
So basically, I've broken this down into a series of steps, being test, work out sort of the general current state of what's happening with your internet, so you know what kind of problems you're trying to solve, and then obviously diagnose based on that what your actual problems are. Take a number of steps around improvement of the connection itself, then also look at how your data is being used by both yourself and any other users on your network, and then kind of make sure that you're doing ongoing monitoring. So the first thing I'm going to do is just kind of walk through the kinds of reports you might get back from one of the various speed test systems online, and what those various numbers mean, and what kind of problems you're likely to be seeing if you're having those. So this is a pretty common kind of a report. Some of them might not have jitter on them, but it's a good report to get, so if you can find one that does, and I'll include a couple of links, then that's often better for informing what you might want to do. So obviously download, important, you have to have enough download to look at the video. General information says that you want your download speed to be at least about 5 megabytes per second, because any less than that you're going to have a bit of problem on some of these bigger video calls that are starting to happen. Upload, this is a little low. Really the minimum upload for video is a little higher than this. This is a doable amount, but if your upload is down under that 1 megabyte per second level, you're going to have to be really careful with all the other data usage on your network to make sure you're not saturating your upload. Because if too many people are trying to upload data at the same time, then your video or voice, whatever else you're trying to send, isn't going to go out. And I think particularly at the moment, the most important thing for a lot of people is suddenly they're trying to have lots of video calls, and having good quality on that's really important. Latency. So latency is the delay between you and wherever the server is, like how long it takes your information to get there. Anything under sort of 300 is going to be fine for most purposes, and a bit higher will still be okay. The main thing you'll notice is the higher your latency, the more you have those issues where your content and speaking might be out of sync with what other people are doing. So you'll have more people interrupting each other on a voice call, for instance, and it'll be more important to have some kind of a raise your hand mechanism or something like that. And then the final stat here is jitter. And in a good quality connection, that should be very low. Basically, it's how much the latency is changing over a period of time. So if jitter is really high, then some of your content is getting to the other side really fast, but some of it's getting to it much slower. And that can be really telling, particularly on the video calls we've got happening now, as some software handles that change in speed better than others, because a lot of them have kind of predictive algorithms that are going, oh, you're this much ahead, so they're dealing with how far ahead you are by going, you're consistently that far behind. Whereas if you've got high jitter, then it can't do that prediction, and the more random it is, the more likely you're going to be having things popping in and out in a bad way. So I just wanted to run through a quick example of what you could be using this information for. So this is a piece, the same speed test you just saw, and another one from exactly the same user with one very, very minor change, which is they went and sat closer to their router. So a lot of people, when they're thinking about their network, they think about kind of the ISP and the other piece. But for a lot of people, depending on where you've ended up, a much bigger challenge can be actually just the home network. Because a lot of ISPs give out a free router when you get a new connection. And unfortunately, those can be kind of bad. And also they can kind of just get wherever in a house. And that can lead to certain types of things going wrong. You'll notice that the upload gets a little bit faster just moving nearer the router. And that's valuable in its own right. Like it's in this particular case where there's a real tight cap. Just going up a little bit can make a huge difference on video calls. But also, this jitter that we were seeing actually went down from 106 milliseconds, which is just over a tenth of a second, to 1 millisecond. So it's become non-existent just by being closer to the router. And that made a huge difference in video calls immediately for the person that it was affecting. So it's a really minor change, but you kind of dig in and go, hey, what's happening? Why is there a problem? And try things. And often the first thing is move closer to the router. But there are a few other little changes you can try for improving your home network. The first one is turn everything off and on again. Some routers get stuck, some settings are unstable. Just do this, and it also means that you can have a nice base state to work from. So if there was anything going wrong, that clears that out of the system. Secondly, move closer to the router. Particularly if you're on your laptop, this is a really easy way to test if it's just network inefficiency internally getting in the way. If it turns out that this does make things better, then you can look at moving the router closer to you, or repositioning where you work, depending on what your setup is. If you're on an older ADSL connection, it's pretty likely that you can move the router just to any phone line in your house. Whereas if you're on VDSL or fiber, then it's likely wired into a particular point in your house, and you'll need to either move closer to it or come up with other solutions for connecting to it, such as running an Ethernet cable to the router, or getting a more powerful router, which is obviously quite challenging right at the moment, but could be getting easier in the future. Or you could ask around and see if anyone you know would be able to deliver one to you in a suitably safe way. But obviously a few options there. This is also the point where you could dive in and start getting into the technical setup of your home router. So there are two key areas in this. One is most routers have a default admin panel where you can go in and tell it which devices in a network are the priority devices, so that they get the available bandwidth before others, and also set some quality of service settings to try and empower prioritization of video calls in particular. So for instance, you'll probably want the computers that people are using for work to have priority over phones, and definitely to have priority over sort of the television, and sort of if you've got a Netflix device or something like that. But that's obviously something to look into. You will need to find a guide for the particular router you have in your house, and see how to actually do those settings if that's available. I've also included an advanced option here, which will be too much for a lot of people, but if you do have the capability, then installing some open source firmware into your router can open up a lot more options in terms of managing data, managing priority, and particularly if you've got a lot of people in a house, can start opening up the ability to manage data between them in a more transparent and active way. So if that hasn't worked, or you still want other things to do, a few key areas to look at: contacting the ISP. If you happen to be on a plan with speed caps, then probably get off them for the foreseeable future. Also, if you've got particularly bad performance, then making sure the ISP knows. Generally they will, so check their status page, but just making sure that information is getting logged. Check your DNS settings. We've seen a couple of things recently, generally not long term, but you can look on Google at how to do custom DNS settings, and some of the smaller providers have been falling over a little bit with the sudden change in user performance and behavior and things like that. If you're part of a corporate network, then your VPN performance could be really getting in the way. A good way to check that is to go back to the speed test tools we were talking about before, and run the same speed test through the VPN and then just through a normal computer on your network, and see if you're getting a dramatically different result. Because one of the things a lot of corporates are finding is that suddenly with a lot more people working from home and all trying to tunnel through their VPN, if those people are then all going back out to the internet again, they actually end up with a huge bottleneck right in the middle of the network. So if that is happening, identify it, and then make sure people in the business are aware that that's where the bottleneck is. They probably are, but it does mean that you can start responding by doing things like accessing larger files, if possible, without using the VPN, and keeping your web browsing that isn't secure and work-related outside of the VPN context. We've also been seeing quite a bit of success with people falling back to mobile. Although there was an initial burst of mobile activity in response to the initial lockdown in New Zealand and that kind of thing, it's actually cut right back down, and we're getting great speeds over mobile broadband connections. And the pricing on that is getting steadily more affordable as things carry on, and certainly is something that can happen remotely at the moment, whereas we're unlikely to get anyone out to fix up physical connections in the next few weeks. And another good thing to look at is also, obviously you want to improve the connection as much as possible, but if you are having problems with the connection you've got not providing enough data to handle the people who are home, whether that's sort of capacity or bandwidth or anything else, then it does require some sort of explicit discussions with everyone who might suddenly be sharing a home network over what the priorities are, and also making sure they're not doing any things that will be particularly detrimental to video and that kind of thing. So get everyone to turn off background sync like Dropbox and OneDrive, and particularly make sure no one's sort of uploading torrents or YouTube videos or that kind of thing without sort of telling people if you're getting those limitations, as well as, if you need to, genuinely coordinating with everyone over who's going to use the bandwidth resource for video calls at any given time. Because the more everyone's sort of agreeing on those things, I think it's generally better for people to have a fewer number of good video calls than for everyone to log into as many calls as possible but have terrible experiences. Certainly our experience is that someone who can't keep up with a video call is worse than not making it to the call in terms of how disruptive it can be to everyone else trying to do work. And yeah, hopefully, if you follow a few of these steps, and over time you can start moving towards something more like this, which is obviously a speed test showing good results that can easily handle many people all sharing bandwidth in a house, which removes the need for a lot of the other juggling. But hopefully these tips will be helpful for people in connecting to the videos that we've got and kind of keeping everyone working over this period. Thanks all, and stay safe.